أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين وأحسن القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال الرسول يا رب إن قوم اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Therefore, continuing from where we left off yesterday, the Holy Quran is a book which is held and given much injustices by its followers. Yet when looking at the books that Muslims have in order when it comes to narrations and other aspects of the religion, we'll see that they can boil down to four, in specific to the followers of Ahlul Bayt, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. For example, we have من لا يحضره الفقيه, الاستهذاب, الاستبصار, and al-kafi, as some may have mentioned. Yet when comparing these books to the Holy Quran, we see of the obvious there is no comparison between them and between the Holy Quran. For none of them hold the same absolute nature that the Holy Quran holds. None of them hold the depth that the Holy Quran holds. And it's for this reason we come to a very clear agreement and consensus that the Holy Quran is the basis of our views as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and as Muslims, that all other books spring from the Holy Quran. That's why I mentioned to you the narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he comes and he tells us that إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ عَنِّي حَدِيث, if a hadith attributed to me or from me, or something that I have said comes to you, فَعْرِضُوهُ عَلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ, then display it to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's in correlation with it, then we act upon it. If it's not, فَضْرِبُوا بِهِ عَرْضَ الْجِدَارِ, then hit it against the walls. It's for this reason a lot of our beliefs we need to be asking ourselves on a day like this: are our beliefs substantiated by the narrations or by the Holy Quran? Because I'll give you a simple example. We come and we believe that crying for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is of utmost importance and of great benefit and rewards. We come and we believe that hitting our chest for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is of great importance and of great benefit. Are these views simply within the narrations, or are they also substantiated by the Holy Quran? You'll see, no, the Holy Quran comes and supports this notion of crying, or at least we can say mentions it on behalf of a prophet who does it, and anything that a prophet does must be correct since prophets are infallible. And even on another level, the Holy Quran mentions a wife of a prophet who would hit herself. Let me give you an example. When we come to the very famous story of Yaqub alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how does he explain the tears of Yaqub falling down? He says, فَبِيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us along these lines within the Holy Quran, his eyes became white Because we know that Yaqub alayhi salam, what happened to him from the levels of tears? He became blind, didn't he? Therefore, we come and ask a very obvious question. Yaqub becomes blind from crying over Yusuf. Yusuf, who eventually came back. Then how do you expect me not to cry upon 18 family members of Ahl al-Bayt who were slaughtered from their neck? We come and we tell them that the Holy Quran comes and says, Yaqub cried and he became blind upon a son who what? Was lost. He wasn't even killed. That's why they would come to Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Ali ibn al-Husayn, salamullahi ta'ala alayhi. They would tell him, Ya Mawlai, Ya Zayn al-Abidin, you cry, you Ahl al-Bayt are used to martyrdom. Your dignity is found in this notion of death. كرامتكم من الله الشهادة إن الموت لكم عادة وكرامتكم من الله الشهادة. Maut, death to you is a norm. And your honor or dignity from Allah Azza wa Jal, karama, dignity and honor from Allah is shahada, martyrdom. Why do you cry? What would the Imam reply to him? He would tell him, may Allah reward you. Oh, the one who is approaching me. He would mention Abu Hamza al-Thumali, perhaps, if I'm not mistaken. He would come to him. He would tell him, you are correct and may Allah reward you for your efforts. Yeah, I tell you, have you ever seen before Karbala the ladies of Rasulullah running from tent to tent? It's something quite difficult to handle. How do you expect me not to cry? This is why it makes sense when we hear the narrations that the Imam alayhi salam, his food would get mixed with his tears. He would cry for 20 or 40 years, however many years the narrations may come and mention to us. Yet we know that the Imam alayhi salam was affected by this incident. Therefore, Quranically, we'll see a prophet becomes blind from crying. How would you expect me not to cry upon Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam? That the point is what? The Holy Quran comes and mentions the beliefs that we believe in. Furthermore, sometimes you'll see people that comes in and tells you this matam is culture. It's not religion. There's no religious basis to it. Why do we do it? It's simply culture. Now the Holy Quran, what does it tell us? Does it tell us that matam and beating our chest for Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, or let's just mention the notion of striking yourself as a general concept? Does the Holy Quran speak out against it? Is it silent about it? Or does it mention it? We come and we look at the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. When the guests would come to Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Holy Quran refers, they would come and they would inform Ibrahim that his wife would now begin to she'd begin to have a child. What does the Quran say? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَأَقْبَلَتْ امْرَأَتُهُ فِي صَرَّةٍ وَصَكَّتْ وَجْهَهَا وَهِيَ قالت عجوز عقيم. Allah Azza wa Jal comes and tells us along these lines that the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam would do what? She would be informed that she's going to have a child. She says, I am ajuz aqim. I'm not able to have a child. What would she do? She wouldn't kindly rub her cheeks. No. She wouldn't even kindly beat her chest. Allah says, sakkat wajhaha. Go and look at the translation of these words. A vicious slap she would hit herself. Therefore, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, she strikes herself in a vicious way for simply finding out she's going to have a child. And she knew that she was what? She was barren. She wasn't able to have this child. She was surprised. She struck herself. And you don't want me to strike myself upon the one who isn't having a child. This wasn't news that's saddening. What's saddening is that his child was slaughtered from neck to neck. He would take Ali al-Asghar alayhi salam, wouldn't he, the famous story, to the opposition asking them for water. Ali al-Asghar receives a 3-pronged arrow into that tender neck of his. Do you know what Harmala ibn Kahil, la'natullahi ta'ala alayhi, do you know what he would say? They would ask him, what were the most devastating arrows that you threw? He would mention to him the arrow for Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. Yet then he would come to a very tragic incident when it comes to the arrows. He would tell him, when I threw the arrow at Ali al-Asghar, you know what kind of arrow did he use? He didn't use these little skinny arrows that you can use for targets. No. He would say, I took out a 3-pronged arrow and I aimed at the neck of Ali al-Asghar alayhi salam. That you'll see that we cry upon these incidents, whereas Yaqub would cry. We hit ourselves for these incidents because we see that the wife of an infallible prophet would do these kinds of things. Therefore, we come and we say, are our views based on narrations without hadith? No, no. On narrations without the Holy Quran? No, no, no. Because today there is this view as if other sects within the religion of Islam are closer to the Quran than you and I. Because our beliefs aren't based on the Quran, they're based on narrations. We come and we say, no. Before you attack me and my beliefs, I ask you kindly, go back to the Holy Quran and examine it properly. This Holy Quran that you're so emphatic upon memorizing and reciting and standing and praying, even though Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't do it. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. All of these views, we come and we say, are based on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hadith, what does it do? Hadith simply comes and clarifies it or gives us details upon the holy verses of the Holy Quran. It's for this reason, when we come to the Quran, we see that there may be a lack of understanding of how to approach it. Today we want to see, I may approach the Quran. That's one incident. Yet how do I approach it successfully? That when I leave the Holy Quran and I just made contact with it, I know that I'm leaving after a successful attempt to understand the Holy Quran. We'll see there are 3 incidents that one needs to take into consideration to have a successful approach to the Holy Quran. How to approach the Holy Quran successfully. We know even when it comes to exercising, there is a pre, a during, and a post. Before I want to do a certain exercise, I come and I do a specific kind of exercise that prepares me for the actual course, for the actual major exercise, we can call it. Then after that, there's another exercise which warms up, which removes the tension that may exist within the muscles. That there is a pre, a during, and a post. When it comes to the Holy Quran, we'll see that it's on the exact same level. Number 1, we want to see what is the pre-Quran exercise, what is a during Quran exercise, that while I'm reading it, what are the elements I need to have, and we'll mention the 3 elements that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam mentions to have a successful approach to the Holy Quran, and then lastly, post-Quran exercise. Let's see what the Holy Quran could be done to have a successful approach to it. Firstly, anything in life, if I want to approach it, there needs to be an approach with interest. Anything that's approached without interest is going to be what? It's either based on a forceful approach. For example, if I approach a certain book, while I'm forcing myself to approach it, I have to study for this test, I have no other option, then what's going to happen? I'm going to realize that approaching this book, it's difficult to understand it. We can all agree, I believe, that approaching something out of love allows you to better understand a book than if you're going to approach it forcefully. Forcefully, you have to what? You have to force yourself to like it. Interest is vital. Before I come to the book, say a lot of us will approach the book, we'll begin to read it, and then I notice for some reason there's no effect on my heart. Something really bad must be happening. Okay. Have I done the pre-Quran exercise? Am I approaching the Quran with an interest, or simply because my parents have done it, therefore I said let me do it as well? Am I approaching it because I love this book, or am I approaching it simply what? Simply because it's a forceful action. I know I've neglected it for so long, therefore let me console myself psychologically by opening it up. Perhaps I'll feel a little bit better. Therefore, what is the pre-Quran? I need to approach the Quran with interest. How do I build interest in my heart towards the Holy Quran? Look at what the Holy Quran comes and tells us. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and describes those who do good, does He simply say there are those who do good and that's it? No, no, no. Allah says they have this notion of wanting to do it. I'll give you an example. Allah says, Allah doesn't simply say, يَعْمَلُونَ الْخَيْرَاتِ, they do good. No, no, no. يُسَابِقُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. They haste in doing good. See, sometimes you'll see a brother, you have to beg him to go and, for example, pass out water to the mu'mineen in the masjid. Another brother, no, no, no. He fights, he says, I want to do it. I'm not going to let you do it. I want to do it. What is there? There's a sense of interest in the heart of this individual that you don't have to force him. He's self-motivated. There are certain people, he's self-motivated. That this individual, the interest already exists in his heart. Allah Azza wa Jal says, يُسَابِقُونَ. They haste. That's why when you come to Surah Al-Waqi'ah, doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come and describe 3 kinds of people? He comes and describes those who, Ashab al-Yameen, then Ashab al-Shimal, and then As-Sabiqun As-Sabiqun. Ula'ika Muqarrabun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and describes along these lines within the Holy Quran. That sabiqun are the highest of levels. These are people who run to do good. He's always asking himself, what else can I do? Not what have I done. So you approach somebody, tell him do something. He'll tell you, I've already done so much. He's lost in his past. You've noticed these kinds of people. You tell him, brother, there's so much to do. Should I come sit down, brother? Let me give you a whole analysis of what I've done last week. He begins with what he did, who he helped, how much he gave. You'll notice these guys are people, he doesn't donate unless his name is mentioned. That he's lost in his past. He's very happy in what he has done. A mu'min, what kind of a mentality does he have? He forgets what he done and he focuses on what there is to do. Certain individuals, no. He's lost in what he's done. I can't do this. Do you know how much I gave last week? Do you know what I did a few moments ago? A mu'min forgets the good of his past. What does he remember of his past? He remembers the sins of his past. That's what a mu'min remembers. Because the more sins you remember, the more eager do you become to do good. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, would we see him walking around always reminding the people of what he has done? He has done unbelievable things. No. For goodness sake, what would they do? Be it Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam or Imam Zayn al-Abidin, we know Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, what would they do? They would wear hoodies and pass out food to the homeless. Allahu Akbar. That he doesn't want even people to see the good that he has done. Not only does he not boast about it, he doesn't even want people to see him giving out food. To who? To the poor people. Therefore, Allah Azza wa Jal comes and mentions, now there's a certain group of people that yusabiquna fil khayrat. They haste in doing good. He does not mention it, yet he always says, what more is there to do? Not what have I done? It's for this reason that I need to ask the question today. What can I do to instill within my heart so that I can begin to have a more willful approach to the Holy Quran, not a forceful one? Of course, this comes by seeing the book with the greatness that it's supposed to be seen in. Let us mention a few points that may exemplify the greatness of the Holy Quran in our minds, then move on to the during and the post so that I can see how do I approach this Holy Quran in a successful approach. That when I come to the Holy Quran, firstly we know that I need to see it as thiqlul akbar, and this is a vital one. Because when you come listen to the narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he comes and he tells us, Allahumma salli ala. He says, Inni tarikum fikum al-thaqalain, famous narration. Yeah, he mentions one thiql over the other. He mentions Kitabullah, number one, wa utrati ahla bayti, doesn't he? That firstly, he puts something before the other. Rasulullah is mentioning a point that there's a thiql akbar and thiql asghar. There is a heavier weight and there is a smaller weight. Both of them are thaqalain, weights. Yet one is heavier than the other. Hence we'll see he mentions one before the other. That when I approach this Quran, I need to see it as thiqlul akbar. It's the greatest of weights that Rasulullah has left me behind. Because you and I know very well that a lot of times we're good at putting the remembrance of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam above the remembrance of the Holy Quran. Now somebody may come and tell me that when I mention Ahlul Bayt, in essence they clarify the Quran for me. And this is a great point. Yet Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they strive to do what? They strive to encourage insan to be more affiliated with this Holy Quran. In the wasiyah of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, what does he come and tell you and I? He comes and he says, Allah fil Quran. He says, Allah fil Quran. Don't let anybody beat you in acting with it or being one who promulgates this holy book. He puts emphasis on it. He says, Allah. Notice, when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam mentions certain things before his death, he's making a point. He's saying, I'm leaving you. Typically in a presentation, the last thing that's mentioned is what? It's typically what? It's the thing that's most freshly left in the minds. Or even in a race, you'll notice the best racer is left where? In the beginning or in the end? Typically in the end, he receives the baton and he makes the strongest run. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, amongst other things, he mentions Allah in this Quran. Don't let anybody beat you in acting upon it. That the Imam alayhi salam himself would strive to do what? He would strive to tell you about this Holy Quran. Notice what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would do. How would they do it, by the way? We know they would do it with their action. Of course, they may not always have been speaking about the Holy Book, yet their action reflects what's in the Holy Book. Let's see some of the examples of the akhlaq of the Holy Prophet of Islam that brought people to the religion of Islam. That you don't necessarily, somebody come and say, okay, I love the Quran, I want to understand it. How do I teach it? I want to get to know, introduce my non-Muslims friends, for example, about this Holy Book. How do I do it? Do I go to him and tell him, John, chapter 24, verse 6 is a great verse. You should really go back home and read it. Perhaps that's not the most effective way. Yet Rasulullah, let's see, what was his approach to spreading religion? Because sometimes the tongues do much more than the action. Yet Islam comes and says, let your action do more than your tongue, not your tongue do more than your action. Sometimes you'll see those, when it comes to speaking, he's the most eloquent. He's top-notch orator. You look at his action, you see an unbelievable gap between what he says and between what he does. Between what he says and what he does. You see a big gap. Rasulullah, would he speak more than he would act? Look at how they would describe him. They would come and describe him, they would say, describing him along the lines until they come and they say, little would he speak, much would he think. Look at the words. Little would he speak, much would he think. That the Prophet wasn't always talking. You don't always have to talk to be effective, because sometimes silence is the best form of speech. Are you with me? Sometimes silence is the best form of speech. What does Imam Ali alayhi salam come and say? He says, I wish my neck was the neck of a giraffe. Imam, that's the only thing you have to ask? You want your neck to be the neck of a giraffe? No. Why? Because he's metaphorically putting it for you and I. That by the time the word reaches my tongue, I've calculated it inside and out. That by the time it reaches my tongue, I've asked myself, is it something I should say or is it something I shouldn't say? That the Imam comes and says that silence sometimes is of great benefit, because silence could be the best form of speech. Why? Look, what does the quote or hadith, whatever it may be, there's a great moral to be extracted from it. It comes and says, if talking is from silver, then silence is from gold. إذا كان الكلام من فضة فالسكوت من ذهب. Then the quote comes and tells us along these lines. If speaking is silver, then staying silent is golden. Why? Because staying silent forms wisdom within the mind. Try this, inshallah. Let us all try this one day in our lives. We sit down. The whole day I don't talk. Wallah, you'll begin to realize things you've never realized. Because sometimes we think we always have to give. We always have to give. Whereas sometimes taking is the most pleasurable of acts that a human being could have. Therefore, he comes and he says, silence, Allah bil Quran, that the Imam alayhi salam, they would spread it through their action sometimes. Let's give the example I mentioned to you, I'll mention. They say the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wasallam would one day be walking and he sees an old lady with a bucket of water. He says, let me go and help this lady. He would go to this lady, he would begin to take the bucket of water from her. While they're walking, she would begin to ask him. She would tell him, excuse me, I want to warn you, you look perhaps like a good boy. Let me give you some pieces of advice. There is this man who goes around speaking of these magical words, spewing this information into the minds of our children, and they come to his path. Wallah, he knows very well who she's speaking about. What did he do? Did he take the bucket, throw it in her face, telling her, take a hike, lady? Did he tell her, I promise you, the minute we leave, I'm going to give you a lesson you'll never forget? You know, sometimes today in school, somebody looks at you wrong. Today, behind the school, 3 o'clock. We know the incidents that take place in class. Rasulullah didn't do any of the following. Keeping in mind, he knows very well who she's speaking about. He continues. Look at how action brings people to the religion of Islam. That when I'm walking in my school, what does the Imam say? He says, Kunu, Allahu Akbar. Look at the narration. Kunu du'atan lana samitin. Be propagators for us who are silent. Look at the narration. Kunu du'atan lana bighayri alsinatikum. Be propagators for us with other than your tongue. Ya Imam, how do I spread Islam without my tongue? He says, no. Be one who his actions comes in, lets the people say, Rahimallah Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Laqad arifa kayfa yu'addib shi'atah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That we act in a way that let the people say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That we act in a way that lets the people say, may Allah have mercy on Ja'far son of Muhammad. He knew how to discipline his Shia. The insan with actions, let's continue. They would reach the final destination. He would put the bucket down. She would then tell him, excuse me, before you leave, can I have your name? A boy with such magnanimous akhlaq. Perhaps I can know your name and tell my people about you. He would tell her, do you know that madman, Sahirun Majnoon, that's referred to? She would say, yes, what about him? What do you have to do with him? He would say, that's Muhammad, and my name is Muhammad. The lady would be in complete shock. She would tell him, you are the same Muhammad that's spreading these words into the minds of our children. He would say, yes, that's me. What should you do? She would say, how can I come to your path? He would say, repeat after me. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah. That she would come to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply by a bucket. Did he tell her about Tawheed? Did he tell her about Nubuwwah, Imamah? He didn't do any of the such. He recognized that picking up a bucket could bring people to the religion. I need to be asking myself today, what's my bucket in society today? His bucket was that bucket. What is my bucket? What is that simple act I can do? See, sometimes people come and say, brother, she comes and she extends her hands, I have to shake it. It's so humiliating. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or let's be more like the Holy Quran, it's a logical religion. We can agree? Yes. Sometimes we think by not shaking the hand, we make ourselves look bad. Whereas I promise you, sometimes telling them my religion doesn't let me brings utmost respect to you and to your religion. That sometimes what does he come tell you? Brother, it's so humiliating. She extends her hands, it's a problem, it's so difficult. What am I going to do? Imagine you're on a stage and you're getting your diploma and she extends your hand, right? And both of you are non-mahram to one another. Neither do you have a glove, nor do you have something covering your hand. Shaking her hand at that moment, am I going to do it or am I not? Because if I don't shake it, I may displease the makhluq. Yet if I do shake it, I'm going to displease the khaliq. Tell me which one is more important. Huh? That I come and I say that if you were not to shake it, what is that simple act going to do? She's going to go back home. She's going to begin to think about it. Why didn't he shake my hand? We may not know. That may be a spark for her path to understand and to delve into the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Islam is a religion of akhlaq. No doubt. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. As Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam comes and tells us. For this reason, Ahlul Bayt, they would strive to teach Quran. How? One of the ways, through their akhlaq. Perhaps we can say one of the most effective ways. Therefore, it's a thiqlul akbar, not thiqlul asghar. Kitabullah wa utrati ahl bayti. The book of Allah and the progeny of my family. That he puts one before the other. And this is an essential point. I ask myself today, who am I placing before the other? The book or the followers and manifestation of the book? That this shows us that the Quran is of utmost importance. For this reason, we'll notice that when you come to the Holy Quran, we'll see that the book is a miracle, no doubt, and I'll come to this. Yet the book has miracles within a miracle. What are the miracles within the Holy Quran? I know the book itself is a miracle. Yet let us come across some historical and linguistic miracles within the Holy Quran, so that when I approach the book, I know truly why I'm approaching a book which is always and many times referred to as a miracle. Let's see. Firstly, we know that when Isa alayhi salam had his miracle, we know it died in his time. Musa's miracle died in his time. We know the Quran continues in its miracle. And I'll come to this later on. This is not the point I want to mention to you. Yet the miracles within the miracle. Firstly, the historical significances within the Holy Quran. You know what? The Quran, we know very well, is not a book of history. It's not a book of science. Sometimes somebody comes and tells to you, I believe in this scientific theory. Why? Because the Quran mentions it. Okay, that's great. But the Quran is not a book that came to teach you science classes. The Quran is not a book that came to teach us history. History books are there. The Quran, does it use history and science and spirituality to guide insan? Yes, because the ultimate goal is hidayah, no doubt. In هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم. This Quran guides to the path which is most upright. Therefore, the Quran uses a number of paths to reach that ultimate goal. Yeah, could we say history is one of the paths? Yes. Yeah, is the Quran a book of history? No. Quran doesn't want to come and simply teach you history. Sometimes you'll notice we treat the Quran as if it's a novel. Come and recite it to the child before he sleeps and let him go to sleep. We treat it, that's great, and don't get me wrong, that's excellent. Because the child is now sleeping with words of Holy Quran that just have been recited to him. Yet the Quran, does it include history? This is an essential point. Yes, but it uses these all as means towards hidayah, which perhaps could be said to be the ultimate goal of the Holy Quran. In هذا القرآن يهدي, this Quran hides, therefore, or guides to the path which is upright. Therefore, let us see some historical miracles within the Holy Quran. Because we know Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he didn't have knowledge. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Certain historical miracles would happen to the Holy Prophet of Islam, and what would we see? we would see historical miracles which were completely irrelevant and unknown to his time. The Christian comes and says that this book is by Muhammad. You'll notice this claim. They come and they tell you this book is written by Muhammad. I come and I tell him, these historical miracles that I'm about to mention to you, how did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam come to know about them? Were it not for divine revelation? The scientific miracles, which is a completely different discussion I may touch upon in the next night. Yet let's stick to the historical and to the linguistic. Firstly, I'll give you an example of Ashab al-Kahf. Allah Azza wa Jalla in Surah Al-Kahf, He comes and He tells us, وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعًا. Listen to the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18 of the Holy Quran, if I'm not mistaken. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and He says, they stayed in their cave for 300 years plus 9. Anybody to come and read this verse, it's a very cumbersome verse. Very strangely put. Quite different than typically Allah Azza wa Jal would give you a number, right? Allah Azza wa Jal comes and says, 300 plus 9. Question. Why is Allah Azza wa Jal telling me 300 plus 9? Just tell me they stayed 309 years. That's it. Are you giving me a equation that you want me to solve mathematically? No. There's an unbelievable historical pinpoint accuracy within this blessed verse. Look at what Allah Azza wa Jal says. That when He comes and He tells you 300 plus 9. Why? Because we know there's two kinds of calendars. The solar and the lunar. You want to look at how many years they stayed in the cave. Solar years, it was 300. You want to go to lunar years, it was 309. Therefore, for Allah to tell you 309 in one of the calendars, meaning within the solar calendar, it would be an incorrect statement. Therefore, Allah Azza wa Jal, what did He do in His ultimate and infinite wisdom? What would He do? And Allah is beyond to be explained as infinite. He creates absolutism. What would He do? He comes and tells you that it's not 309, 300 plus 9, because you want to study it from a solar calendar, then it's 300. From a lunar calendar, 309. That's why even if you were to do the math, do 11 days, the days difference between solar and lunar, 11 days times 300, the days which they stayed according to the solar, divide by 365, how many days do you get? You get 9.04. Yes? Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is He saying? The difference between solar and lunar, the years that they stayed, is 9 years. Therefore, I can't just tell you 309. 300 سنين وازدادوا تسعة. And they added in 9. Pinpoint accuracy historically. We move on. You then come to another historical magnificent incident within the Holy Quran, which is the incident of Fir'aun. You and I know very well, Fir'aun, la'natullahi ta'ala alayhi, when he would drown, where would he drown? In Arabia? No. In a land very distant from Arabia, to the extent that when he would die, where would they put his body? They would put his body in a land in Necropolis, in the tombs of the land of Necropolis, of Thebes, on the opposite side of the Nile River from Luxor. This land is completely separate from Medina, completely separate from Saudi, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, be it Mecca or Medina. When this verse came down, Allah Azza wa Jalla knows better, and we may find out Mecca or Medini. Yet nonetheless, we'll find out that he would be in a land completely distant from where Fir'aun. Question, wallah, you question your Jewish brother, you question your Christian brother, you question those who claim that this book to be a book of Muhammad. You'll notice a number of claims they come and they tell you, this book is written by Muhammad. Firstly, we'll come later on to the refutation. Let me not get ahead of the points. Therefore, we come to the story of Fir'aun. The man, as some have said, was in Necropolis of Thebes on the opposite side of the Nile from Luxor. How does Rasulullah know about Fir'aun and what happened to him? Furthermore, when did they discover the body? 19th century, as some have noted. 19th century, Rasulullah lived years before they even discovered. Ya Allah Azza wa Jal says, we want to make you a sign. He says, نَجْعَلُكَ آيَةً. Allah Azza wa Jalla comes and tells us along these lines. We want Fir'aun to be a sign for the people. Therefore, we come and we ask the question, what informed Rasulullah of the body of Fir'aun, which was in a distant land? And some have mentioned, discovered in the 19th century or near the 19th century, as some have mentioned 19th century. What informed him were it not for a divine revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? On a second level, the incident of Fir'aun, Ashab al-Kahf, Fir'aun. You then come to a very interesting one, which has brain-boggled historians perhaps. This land known as Iram. We know in Surah Al-Fajr, we read, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad. Irama, dhatil imad. And then Allah Azza wa Jal continues the verse. This notion of Iram, what is Iram? Allah, first of all, what does Allah say? Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad. Allah Azza wa Jal comes and says, do you not see what your Lord did to the people of Ad? Iram. Iram is what? Iram is a land. Allah Azza wa Jal. Iram, dhatil imad. Some come and say that historically there's no proof for this land of Iram. Where did the Quran get this from? We found a historical flaw within the Holy Quran. There it is. Habibi, first of all, calm down, sit down, drink some tea, because we're going to answer you very soon. He comes and he says that Iram, what is this land of Iram? We come and we tell him, excuse me, first of all, Iram, you'll notice in 1978 they recognized what Iram was. Because in 1975, Dr. Puello in the University of Rome, the Italian archaeological studies of Syrian archaeology, along these lines they would name their institution, Dr. Puello in 1975, he would be in Syria and they would come and they would recognize that there were nearly 15,000 cuneiform tablets. 15,000 along this number if I'm not mistaken. They would come, they would find thousands of cuneiform tablets. They would take one of the tablets and they would begin to notice that there was trades between a location in Syria and between a land by the name of Iram. Historians said, very rightly so, that this land does exist, yet the Quran comes and tells you that Iram does, because a lot of times what happens, you'll notice an atheist, or you'll notice a non-Muslim, or even a Muslim, he sees something within the Holy Quran and he begins to doubt it. He says, this can't be right, impossible. It makes no sense at all. Do you know what insan really falls in the trap? Besides saying, perhaps my logic is wrong, and the Quran is correct, insan is so arrogant. What does he say? He says, this book makes no sense because it makes no sense to me. Habibi, who's a ma'soom? Are you a ma'soom or is the book a ma'soom? Huh? What does he say? He says it makes no sense, therefore I can't accept it. Okay, what if there's a possibility you are mistaken and the book is a flawless, perfect book? But no, insan sometimes can have unbelievable arrogance. This book is incorrect, it makes no sense to me. Okay, maybe you're incorrect, huh? Wallah, you'll see some people. I remember sitting in a biology class actually, and you hear this professor, he comes up and he says that the eye of the eagle, there's some problems with it because there's a blind spot and there's some problems with it. You come and you ask him, excuse me, professor, you come and you say that this has a flaw in it. I have a question for you. Are we imperfect creatures? Yes, we are. You said there was an imperfection in the eagle's eye? Yes, he did. A question, how could an imperfect creature dictate what is perfect, huh? You, oh imperfect creature, you have such arrogance to come and say that this creation is incorrect. I ask you a question, you are imperfect, therefore how could imperfection dictate and measure what perfection is? Do you know what he tells you? He tells you, no, it's a blind spot. No. Give it some years down the line, you'll recognize there's a reason why this has happened. How many times have they said, we don't know why this is happening in the world? We don't understand it. Yes, because Allah sees the end. We are limited. We are ignorant. Insan is ignorant individual. Therefore, but what is he? Not only is he ignorant, it's a very dangerous combination. Insan can be ignorant and arrogant at the same time. What an unbelievable combination. You'll see somebody, he's ignorant. And he's ignorant. He may tell you, I'm ignorant, I don't know. There's another one, he's ignorant. Not only doesn't he know, and not only does he know that he doesn't know. It's a big tragedy, I tell you. That he's ignorant and arrogant at the same time. He doesn't know that he doesn't know. You see, some people, perhaps there's a lack of knowledge, yet he talks, and he continues, and you ask yourself, does he know what he's saying? I mean, really, seriously. But you look at Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen faced problem with these kinds of people. That they would come, they tell him how much pieces of hair were in my beard. Therefore, what does this biology teacher say? He comes and he says it's imperfect. Question. You see it as an imperfection, yet question yourself first. Have a humble individual questions himself before questions others. He comes to a certainty that he is correct. Then he begins to question others. Therefore, they would come and they recognize that in the tablets, amongst the other information that would be on these tablets, these thousands of tablets, they would see that it was established tradings between a location in Syria and between the land of Iran. Therefore, we take these three incidents, Ashab al-Kahf, Fir'aun, and the incident of Iran, which comes as simply a reflection, a drop in the ocean, in this limitless ocean of the Holy Quran, of the historical pinpoint accuracy in this book on one level. Then when you come to another aspect, is that all we have? No, because we want to know. This is all what? This is all pre. I still haven't even come to the book. You come to the book to have a knowledge of its greatness, to say, I'm approaching it, it's a book of greatness. Therefore, what is the second level? We know that the Holy Quran came down in a time where people were infatuated with language and poetry, weren't they? In fact, language and poetry was it was the way to go in society. That if you want to be prominent, you have to have a knowledge of poetry. You have to have a strong command of the Arabic language. Allah Azza wa Jal did something unbelievable. You know what He did? He said, I'm going to send you a miracle which you are most confident with. You're most confident with your language. Because sometimes people come in and ask, Quran is a miracle. Come on, give me, how is that a miracle? Musa alayhi salam split the sea. Now that's a miracle. Isa alayhi salam would resurrect the dead bi'idhnillah, through the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a miracle. How do you come and tell me the Quran is a miracle? No. Put it in its context. Put it in its time. You'll see why it was a miracle. People were so proud of the Arabic language that they had. Allah Azza wa Jal, what did He do? He came and He told them, you're proud of your language. What am I going to do? I'm going to give you a book which is even going to beat what you're most good at. Allah Azza wa Jal gave them a taste of their own medicine. That you think you're good with language? Wait, I'm going to give you a book which is even better. Because what would happen? Allah Azza wa Jal challenges them in the Quran. Don't we read that in the Quran? Firstly, He challenges the world. Perhaps He should customize it, Allah Azza wa Jal. Perhaps He wanted to take it easy on them, Allahu Alam. He would say, hey, 10 surahs, that's all I want from you. Just give me 10 surahs, not more. No one would come back. Perhaps that's too difficult. 1 surah, that's all I... And keep in mind, these were people. What was being threatened with this challenge? Their possessions, their life, their positions and possessions were being challenged. Because their lives surrounded upon this notion of polytheism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would come and challenge them. He would say, 10, perhaps too much. 1, that's all I want from you. 1 surah. Where in history do you know somebody that came forward with the Holy Quran? And if he did, it was not at the level of the quality that the Holy Quran came forward with. That on a linguistic level, that's why you see Philip Khoury Hitti, the scholar, he came and he said, and I paraphrase what he said, that there is no culture like the Arabic culture that shows such pride and command of their language. That this is our pride as Arabs, the Holy Quran. And that's why this is so essential to make a point here that even if we're not Arabs, we should make an initiative to understand the Arabic language. Sometimes you'll see somebody says, I don't understand the Arabic language. Yes, first of all, as Muslims, the language of Islam is Arabic. And as some may have mentioned in narrations, have said that the language of Jannah is also what? Arabic. Therefore, perhaps in my life, I should take a course, a year or 2 years, to understand what is this language of Arabic, because Allah Azza wa Jal sent it to me, and at the end of the day, He chose a reason. There's a reason why He sent it to me in Arabic. Could have sent it in another language, because no doubt it's the best of languages. It's for this reason. These are all what? These are all pre. I approach the book recognizing that it's not only a miracle, but it has miracles within a miracle. Then I approach the book. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he comes and he gives us, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Our sixth Imam, what does he give us? He comes and he gives us 3 elements to have in consideration when I approach the book. And I ask myself today, what are the 3 elements that Imam comes and mentions, and do I have them when I approach the book? Vital 3 elements. Let's see what he says. Firstly, he says an individual is supposed to have a fearful heart. Look at the words of our Imam. Number 1, a fearful heart. Number 2, a receptive and tranquil body. Number 2, look at the words. Then he says, number 3, a area or an environment which is suitable. Meaning an environment which is suitable, because we know insan is a product of his environment. It could have an effect on us. Then he says, number 1, a fearful heart. I read the verses that come and speak to me about Jahannam. I come and I ask myself, is my heart feeling as if the heat of Jahannam is touching it when I read these verses? Because the Imam alayhi salam, when he describes the muttaqeen, what does he say for us? He says, Hum wan nar kaman qad sami'a zafiruha. He says the muttaqeen and the fire, it's as if they hear the what? You know, sometimes you're sitting next to a fire and you hear those sparkles, and you hear it bursting flames. You hear, especially when you're putting the bonfire together. Imam alayhi salam comes and says, them and the fire, it's as if they hear zafiruha. Wahum wal jannah. And them and heaven, it's almost as if they also feel the pleasure and bliss of Jannah as well. That a fearful heart on a first level. On a second level, what does the Imam alayhi salam say? He says there needs to be a tranquil body. Physically, if I'm not in the best condition, let me not approach the Holy Quran. Sometimes we're exhausted and we approach Salah. Is that Salah going to be the most effective Salah? Perhaps waiting a few minutes, relaxing physically has an unbelievable effect in the spirituality in the Salah. And then number 3, an environment. Sometimes an individual cannot study when there's people around him and noises and screaming. Imam alayhi salam, what does he say? He says, separate yourself, isolate it, go in a suitable environment. That's why you can all perhaps agree with me that when I say reading the Quran in a masjid, you feel a different feeling than when you read it in a house. Because there's a spiritual environment in the masjid. That's why even one of the signs of the ends of time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do you know what he says? Something quite interesting. He says their mosques would be in their homes. If you want to know when the time of Zaman is, you'll notice people separating themselves from masjid. No, I don't want to come. I'm going to do majlis in my house. That's excellent. Do majlis in your house. Yeah, a masjid is there for a reason. Rasulullah says, when their mosques would be within their houses. What is Rasulullah perhaps alluding to? One of the points we can extract from this. That the environment of the masjid is a special one. What did Rasulullah do in Quba? One of the first things, he established a masjid, didn't he? Masjid Quba. He's saying that masajid are vital to the Muslims. It's what, where would you find a gathering like this were not for masajid? People of different cultures perhaps, people of different genders, people of different even beliefs, ages. You see the young, the old. This is what we learn from Karbala. You had the young, the old, the black, the white. Therefore, he says a suitable environment. This is during. I asked myself, do I have these 3? Number 1, fearful heart. Number 2, tranquil and receptive body. And number 3, the environment which the Imam alayhi salam mentions. And then when you come to the last point, and I know time is coming short before we go to the musibah, we see that when you come to the after, which is of utmost importance, perhaps I will go into tomorrow, which is of course the notion of contemplation and the importance of taking into consideration what I did and putting it into the post-Quran exercise. Because contemplation, what does it do? There are levels of contemplation. Contemplating on Allah, contemplating on the creations, contemplating on myself. This contemplation, what does it do? We've heard all of the narrations. We all know these narrations. 1 hour better than what? 70 years. 1 hour better than this many years. Even some traditionalists and some fuqaha, what do they say? Better than 1,000 years. Why? Because this contemplation induces mercy into the heart of the individual. And that's why when you come to the story of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we see the mercy in his heart was like none other. He would tell them amongst his wills, feed him from my food, feed Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam. What kind of mercy existed in the heart of this man? Salamullahi ta'ala alayk ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. He would say, quench his thirst from my drink. Look at the mercy in this heart. Even some have mentioned when they brought him with chains, what would he say? He would say, loosen the chains from the neck of Abdul Rahman. I feel as if the chains are hurting him. What kind of mercy existed in your heart, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib? He would say, loosen the chains. I feel as if they're hurting him. Do you know what Abdul Rahman says? He says, I bought the sword for 1,000 and I poisoned it with 1,000 dirhams. What kind of poison went into the head of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen when he was struck. Yeah, on a night like this, Imam is sitting next to his children, next to his family. He looks at Imam al-Hassan. He tells him, let me rephrase what I mentioned to you yesterday. He would tell Imam al-Hassan of what would happen to him and the oppression he would go down at least. He would tell Imam al-Hussein that he'd be butchered like a sheep. Yet also another line, he would tell Zainab of what would happen to her. She would be taken from one land to another. No doubt he would inform her that she would be oppressed. Perhaps among other things he would mention. Yet then Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is noticed to have been wiping the sweat from his forehead. Zainab tells him, Ya Abah, why do you remove the sweat from your forehead? What does he say? He says, I remember Rasulullah saying, when the individual meets death, he tells us along these lines, he meets the death, he begins to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen gives his last wills to his family, telling them, hold on to the Quran, don't let one be you to it. Allah, Allah fi siyam, Allah, Allah fi zakat, Allah, Allah. Imam would mention to them certain things of much importance. Yet, ya mu'mineen, Imam would begin to sweat. He would extend his legs. He would begin to shout, Bismillah, wa billah, wa ala millati Rasulillah. He would make his last words to his family. He would begin to do shahada of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Yet then his eyes would close and the soul of the Imam would leave this world. Zainab would run upon his chest. I want to mention to you this last line. I know time is coming short, yet this is the day of istishhad. Time should be given to our Imam. He tells us that Zainab would throw herself on the chest of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Yet the question needs to be asked, Zainab, you were on the chest of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, yet who was on the chest of your brother Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? Furthermore, Zainab, how many chests did she fall on? Allahu Akbar. She fell on the chest of Amir al-Mu'mineen. She fell on the chest of who? Even Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam. She would tell her, come closer to me in her last moments. She would tell her, if you see Imam al-Hussein going to the battlefield, tell him, Mahlan mahla ya ibn al-Zahra. Imam would be going, she would tell him, take off your armor. She would kiss him once from his neck and once from his chest, and she would head towards the land of Medina, saying, Ummah Fatima, I have fulfilled your trust. Imam tells her, what trust are you talking about? She tells him, when Fatima was on the deathbed, she told me to kiss you once from your neck and once from your chest. Why, ya Zainab? She would tell him, as for the neck it would be severed, Abu Abdullah, and as for the chest it would be trampled upon. May Allah give mercy to the heart of Zainab. On the chest of Ali she would fall, on the chest of Fatima she would fall, and then she would be on the chest of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. She would tell him, Umar ibn Sa'ad, why don't you bring relaxation to Imam al-Hussein? How could you see him like this? What would he say? He would say, Arihu, bring relaxation to him. What would he do? Would he bring a cup of water? No. Would he bring a bed for him to die on? No. He would say, Shimir, go and cut the head of Imam al-Hussein. Shimir would come, he would kick Zainab from the body of Imam al-Hussein. 12 strikes, every strike. Imam says, Allahu Akbar. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We know salah time is coming near. Yeah, this is a blessed night, brothers and sisters. These are open windows to remember Imam al-Mu'mineen, to gain barakah from him. Amma yujib 3 times before we conclude. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-sum. One more time. Amman برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين, and to answer our du'as and to hasten the repentance of our 12th and awaited Imam will recite Surah Al-Fatiha before the loudest or loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.